Hi everyone. Welcome back. We appreciate your presence today. We have a novel narrative to present to you. Let us commence. My name is Peter, and for an extended period, I believed I had a stable marriage. Imperfect, yet substantial. My spouse, Lisa, and I have been united for some years. We experienced fluctuations typical of any partnership, although we consistently discovered methods to resolve our issues, or so I presumed. Upon reflection, I recognized that while I clung to the notion of our marriage, Lisa had already disengaged. It did not occur suddenly. Initially, it involved little details. She ceased performing the minor tasks she formerly engaged in. Individuals experience stress, emotional fluctuations, and overwhelming life circumstances. I comprehend that. However, this was not merely tension. This was distinct. Individuals do not abruptly awaken one day and begin to perceive their partner as a liability. Such changes do not occur without justification. I was resolute in uncovering the underlying reason. She began returning home late, and if I inquired about her whereabouts, her responses were ambiguous and disinterested. She would simply state that she was out, scarcely diverting her gaze from her phone. When I exerted a slight push, it was merely an uncomplicated exit. She would express her annoyance by rolling her eyes or sighing as if I were a nuisance. That was novel. Lisa was not previously this contemptuous. The woman I wed would disclose everything to me, occasionally with painful detail. I was fortunate to receive more than a one-word response. Subsequently, the telephone arrived. It was perpetually with her. If she were in the living room, it would be in her hand. Whenever she rose to fetch a glass of water, the phone accompanied her. In the late hours of the night, I would observe the illumination of the screen. "May I inquire whom you are messaging?" She would assert that he was merely a buddy. When I inquired about which friend she would choose to unfriend, I questioned the reason for your concern. One evening, while we reclined in bed, I resolved that I could no longer disregard it. I inquired of her, "Lisa, what is troubling you? What is the reason behind your behavior?" She had no hesitation whatsoever. She breathed sharply and stated, if I had something to articulate, I would express it. "Please allow me to sleep." That was painful. A few days later, my suspicions were confirmed. A communication from an acquaintance. He was forthright at the onset of our conversation. "I believe it would be prudent for you to consider Lisa. I observed her in the company of a male, and they do not appear to be merely friends." I was rendered dumbfounded. My initial response was one of disbelief. Negative, not Lisa. Not my spouse. An explanation was necessary. However, I reflected about her behavior. The distance. The confidentiality. The nocturnal hours. The secured mobile device. The change in mentality. I saw a disquieting truth. This did not arise unexpectedly. I wished to believe my friend was mistaken. However, I was unable to do so. Fundamentally, I was already aware that he was not. I sensed that something was amiss with Lisa. However, understanding it and substantiating it were distinct matters. I required substantial proof. Something incontrovertible. A situation from which she could not extricate herself through verbal persuasion. To achieve that, I needed to begin with her phone. Lisa has consistently been vigilant over her phone. Recently, it had escalated from ordinary caution to extreme paranoia. She maintained possession of it at all times. Regardless of whether she was in the kitchen, the restroom, or only walking outside for a little while. She consistently monitored it. While utilizing it, she positioned the screen away from my view. That in itself was dubious. However, I required more than mere intuition. One evening, I finally obtained a brief opportunity. She left her phone on the couch while entering the bathroom. My pulse raced as I extended my hand towards it. This represented my opportunity. I swiped upward to unlock it. However, it resulted in a dead end. The password was altered. I attempted the previous version, as a precaution. However, it proved ineffective. My abdomen constricted. Lisa and I had never concealed our passwords from one another previously. This was not merely a coincidence. At that moment, I realized she was concealing something. Regardless of its nature, she wished to conceal it from my view. I replaced the phone precisely in its original position and remained seated. If Lisa were engaging in infidelity, she would be unable to eliminate all traces. Individuals err when they become complacent. They get careless. That is when they are apprehended. If I was unable to access her phone, I needed to adopt an alternative strategy. I required first-hand observation. Several days later, I ultimately received my opportunity. Lisa informed me that she was stepping out to procure something briefly. No other facts, no indication of her companions, but ambiguous enough to provoke my instincts. I chose to pursue her. After she departed, I waited several minutes before retrieving my car keys and driving away, ensuring I maintained a sufficient distance so she would not perceive my presence. I followed her through several streets until she stopped in front of an unfamiliar residence. She exited the vehicle and approached the door, knocking with the assurance of one experienced in this action. The door opened, revealing an unfamiliar man. As if I were aware, I held my phone ready to capture images of everything. The man appeared unperturbed by her presence. He grinned and stepped aside to allow her inside. The door closed behind them, and in that instant, my wife entered another man's residence. I reviewed several photographs captured on my phone, anticipating their future necessity. I refrained from entering. I did not contact her. I did not create a disturbance. I remained seated for several further minutes, gazing at the house, with the truth of my marriage disintegrating before my eyes. Subsequently, in silence, I commenced my vehicle and proceeded homeward. She returned later that evening, behaving entirely normally. That aspect affected me the most. I concluded that I had postponed long enough. I was not inclined to prolong this any further. I summoned her into the living room and instructed her to take a seat. She exhaled audibly, evidently irritated, yet she seated herself, arms crossed, her gaze directed at me as if she had more pressing matters to attend to. I inhaled deeply, gazed directly into her eyes, and stated, "I require you to terminate whatever is occurring, or our relationship will conclude." I did not elevate my voice. I did not issue a threat. I merely presented it as a fact. She scowled, shaking her head. "I am unaware of what you are referring to," she stated, her tone devoid of emotion. "No activity is occurring." I retrieved my phone from my pocket and oriented the screen towards her. There existed unequivocal images of her entering his residence, sharing laughter with him. I observed her expression as she gazed at them. For an instant, she appeared apprehended. Subsequently, her expression altered with equal rapidity. The guilt vanished, supplanted by an alternative emotion. Fury. "Did you actually follow me?" "That's outrageous," she exclaimed, her voice escalating. "Your lack of trust in me has led to your surveillance of my actions." "That is impressive, Peter." I experienced an inward chill. She expressed no remorse. She exhibited no shame. She exhibited no surprise whatsoever. Rather than accepting accountability, she deflected it onto me, attempting to portray me as the antagonist for uncovering the truth. I breathed deliberately, affirming to myself with a nod. "Understood," I stated while rising. "Understood." I refrained from disputing. The endeavor proved futile. She had already rendered her decision. The subsequent week was a haze of quietude. Although we resided under the same roof, it seemed as though we were unfamiliar to one another. Avoid trivial conversation. No insincere expressions. Two individuals coexisting in the same environment, anticipating an event. She refrained from elucidating her position. She made no attempt to rectify the situation, and I was well certain that she would continue her association with him. I had no intention of imploring her to be faithful. That was not love. That was a manifestation of despair, yet I was not in a state of desperation. While she continued to feign normalcy, I discreetly visited my attorney's office and initiated the proceedings. If she desired to be with him so fervently, she might have him, however, she would not drag me down with her. One morning, while I was preparing for work, Lisa unexpectedly arrived to see me. I was almost through fastening my shirt when Lisa spoke. Her tone was composed. "I am preparing dinner for you this evening." I hesitated momentarily, my fingers suspended above the final button. Her remarks need a moment to be completely comprehended. Lisa had not prepared a meal for me in some months. Not since the inception of this situation. Recently, she scarcely acknowledged my existence except to exhibit coldness or dismissiveness. Suddenly, she expressed a desire to prepare dinner. I glanced at her. She stood adjacent to the dresser, perusing her phone. That is what rendered it dubious. I did not reply immediately. I sought to ascertain whether she had provided any follow-up or explanation, but she did not. Finally, I stated, maintaining a neutral tone. If this were a game, I would not reveal my strategy first. As I departed for work, my thoughts persisted. Was this an endeavor to ameliorate the situation? She may have experienced guilt and sought to provide a peace offering. Was she preparing for an alternative scenario? A revelation? A justification? A conclusive demonstration of dominance prior to undermining me? I was not inclined to remain idle and await the outcome. Unbeknownst to Lisa, I had already initiated measures to extricate myself from this marriage. The divorce documents were meticulously organized in a folder, awaiting the opportune moment. Moreover, I possessed something she would not anticipate. While she was clandestinely involved with her hidden paramour, I was also developing a connection with someone. Her closest companion. It commenced as informal dialogues, brief instances of mutual exasperation with Lisa's conduct. However, with the passage of time, it evolved into something greater. She recognized the lady Lisa had evolved into and harbored no misconceptions regarding her true identity. I resolved that if tonight's dinner was a psychological manipulation and she was still engaged in her affair, I would not contest it. I would not solicit. I would not become angry. I would terminate our marriage according to my conditions. Upon returning home that evening, I experienced an indescribable sensation. Lisa occupied the kitchen, and the aroma of home-cooked cuisine permeated the atmosphere, a sensation I had not encountered in an extended period. A few months prior, I could have felt excitement, perhaps even optimism, regarding her attempts to rectify the situation. However, I possessed greater knowledge now. This dinner was not a peace offering. I seated myself at the table, observing her as she moved with elegance, arranging the dishes, pouring the wine, and smiling. We dined predominantly in silence. She inquired not about my day, nor did I inquire about hers. The sole auditory elements were the clinking of cutlery upon porcelain, the sporadic sipping of wine, and the palpable tension that lingered between us as if it were a third person at the table. Midway through the meal, I set down my fork and gazed at her. She exhibited excessive calmness and composure, a woman who had decisively resolved her stance. I reclined slightly and inquired, "Have you concluded your affair?" She did not exhibit any reaction. She merely smirked and reclined in her chair as if she had anticipated this moment. She then declared, "I am departing from you." I breathed gently, primarily out of enjoyment. There was a period when those comments would have devastated me, prompting me to implore her to remain and rethink. However, they now seemed like a protracted conclusion to a narrative I should have concluded long ago. I grinned, an authentic smile. I rose from my seat, proceeded to the bedroom, and returned with a stack of meticulously organized papers. I positioned them on the table before her and pushed them forward. "Excellent," I stated, my tone unwavering and composed. "I have already prepared and signed the paperwork." For the first time that evening, her self-assurance faltered. She was unprepared for this outcome. She gazed at the documents, then at me, seeking a reaction she might exploit. However, there was nothing, only tranquility. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and her head turned sharply. She was not anticipating any visitors. I had been anticipating this moment all night. I reclined my chair, leisurely approached the door, and opened it. Lisa's best friend stood in the doorway, exuding effortless beauty. The woman whom Lisa had entrusted with all her secrets. The woman with whom I had been developing a closer relationship since I acknowledged the demise of my marriage. I stepped aside and indicated her, introducing my new girlfriend. The expression on Lisa's face was invaluable. It beyond astonishment, it was betrayal, disbelief, and perhaps even regret. She had overlooked that when engaging in games, one must be ready to accept defeat. I must be honest, Lisa did not respond favorably. Upon realizing I had outpaced her, she became irate. It like observing an individual transition from composure to utter chaos within only seconds. She transitioned from astonished silence to vociferous accusations, inquiring whether I had lost my sanity and invoking every epithet imaginable. However, I refrained from disputing. I had no necessity to do so. My task was completed, the documents were on the table, and she had a decision, to sign them or let the court to resolve the matter. Initially, she pretended she would not engage in unscrupulous behavior. She feigned acceptance, claiming a desire to progress. However, I was acutely aware of her character. When reality confronted her, she transformed into the woman I always believed she could be, spiteful, vengeful, and poised to obliterate everything in her way. The focus had shifted from the marriage to inflicting suffering upon me. She exerted every effort to attempt. She appeared in court and assumed the role of the victim. She alleged that I had exhibited controlling, manipulative, and abusive behavior. She asserted that she felt confined in the marriage, that I had sequestered her from friends, diminished her self-worth, and subjected her to emotional distress. She even fabricated several false narratives, events that never occurred, solely to portray me as the antagonist. Furthermore, what is the most unfavorable aspect? Certain individuals believed her. That is the nature of falsehoods. When articulated with sufficient confidence, statements begin to resemble the truth. However, I was not inclined to permit her to alter the historical narrative. When my opportunity arose, I allowed the evidence to convey its own message. I possessed photographs of her clandestinely entering her paramour's residence. I received text messages that unequivocally indicated this was not only a platonic connection. Subsequently, there was the financial aspect. Bank statements that evidenced her utilization of funds from our joint account to finance her extramarital relationship. My attorney meticulously emphasized each detail, every withdrawal, and every expenditure associated with the affair. However, the significant impact emerged when we discussed the emotional burden. I endured months in that marriage feeling as though I was losing my sanity, always doubting myself and questioning whether I was the source of the issue. My attorney contended that the psychological distress inflicted upon me, including deceit, gaslighting, and betrayal, had significantly impacted my well-being. The court paid attention. Upon the issuance of the final verdict, I discerned the defeat reflected in Lisa's eyes. The judge divided the assets equitably, but, due to my compelling evidence, I retained the majority of my acquired possessions. She was unable to depart with all that she had intended. She believed she could destroy me, but instead, she merely revealed her own shortcomings. Upon exiting the courthouse, I had a sensation I had not encountered in a considerable time: serenity. One would assume that with all that has transpired, I would feel fulfilled, perhaps even content. However, the reality is that no one departs from an experience of this nature unscathed. I advanced, or so I reassured myself. I commenced a romantic relationship with Lisa's closest companion. She had witnessed the aftermath, saw Lisa's treatment of me, and, in contrast to my ex-wife, genuinely valued me. However, intrinsically, a part of me remained unable to dispel the notion that regardless of my companionship, I would perpetually anticipate an impending misfortune. One does not endure treachery of this magnitude and emerge unchanged. I discovered that trust is not freely bestowed, it is cultivated. Once fractured, it never fully reassembles as it once did. Is it possible for me to trust someone sufficiently to remarry? At present, I do not believe so. Not because of a lack of desire, but more because I am uncertain if I will ever see love in the same manner. It resembles the experience of touching a hot stove in childhood. Once burned, one instinctively recoils upon approaching heat. What about me? I sustained a severe burn. Ultimately, I recognized a significant insight. Occasionally, those we place our utmost trust in are the individuals who betray us most profoundly. When they do, the most effective retaliation is fueled by wrath. It is not an attempt at retribution, nor is it expending energy on animosity towards them. The most effective form of revenge is to progress, thrive, transform into an individual they can never reclaim, and ensure they experience remorse for losing you daily. Undoubtedly, Lisa had remorse. That suffices for me. That concludes my narrative, everyone. It is indeed a wild one. However, that is life, is it not? You believe you understand that individual, and you construct a life alongside them. Eventually, they discard everything as if it were inconsequential. However, I did not permit it to annihilate me. Should you encounter a similar situation, do not permit it to undermine you. I would want to have your input now. Do you believe I managed this appropriately? Should I have acted differently? Please share your ideas in the comments section. I perused each and every one. Be mindful that if something seems amiss in your relationship, it likely is. Do not disregard the indications. Thank you for viewing, and I look forward to our next encounter.